A desert silence speaks louder than words in Yemen. In the first rays of dawn, before the sun scorches the stones of ancient Marib, before the call to prayer rises from crumbling minarets, the land breathes a secret, not one etched in parchment or buried in ruins, but encoded in the very blood of its people. For centuries, archaeologists, linguists, and historians have debated where the first modern humans stepped out of Africa. Many pointed to the Sinai, others to the northern shores of the Red Sea. But what if they all overlooked the most silent witness? Yemen, more than 1,000 generations ago, when the world was colder and the Arabian Peninsula was little more than an arid expanse pierced by scattered oases, something extraordinary happened. As ice retreated and seas rose, small groups of hunter-gatherers crossed the narrow strait of Bab el-Mandeb. From the Horn of Africa, they stepped onto the edge of Arabia and into history. Yemen, positioned like an open palm reaching toward East Africa, became the unmarked waypoint of humanity's greatest migration, the out-of-Africa expansion. But strangely, history has left Yemen's role nearly unspoken. The land that connected continents became, in time, a forgotten corridor, a path remembered only by the dust beneath our feet and the genes in our cells. The earliest genetic traces in modern Yemenis tell of this passage. Researchers have uncovered genomic signatures pointing to gene flow from Arabia and the Levant as early as the Epipaleolithic era, an ancient pulse dating back over 12,000 years. And yet, this wave was only the beginning, because unlike other lands that witnessed new settlers after every century, Yemen did not easily welcome change. After those early migrations, there was stillness, isolation. The human story continued elsewhere. Yemen waited. Its geography, a mountainous fortress hemmed by sea and desert, protected it from the constant tides of invasion that reshaped the DNA of so many neighboring regions. While the Levant absorbed Anatolians, Caucasians, and empires, Yemen remained largely untouched. And in that isolation, it preserved something priceless. Genetic signals that have vanished elsewhere still echo here, quiet, undisturbed. The people of inland Yemen, particularly regions like Sheba and Marib, still carry markers not just of ancient Arabians, but of the Natufians themselves. The first villagers, the first harvesters of wheat, the first to bury their dead with care. A people whose footsteps were some of the earliest along the path from forager to civilization, and whose bloodlines now run strongest not in Lebanon, not in Israel, but in Yemen. It's not just a migration story. It's a survival story. Because when the climate turned cruel, when the rivers dried and deserts swallowed forests, Yemen became a shelter. When kingdoms rose and fell beyond its mountains, Yemen kept the genetic memory intact. When humans scattered to the ends of the earth, Yemen guarded the fork in the road where it all began. Today, scientific tools like principal component analysis and F-statistics reveal what history forgot. Yemen isn't merely a southern cousin of Arabia. It is one of the oldest untouched chapters in the story of human movement, a preserved genetic time capsule. And as we peer into the data, as ancient genomes are aligned with modern ones, one thing becomes clear. Yemen was not just a route. It was a witness, a participant, a keeper of origins. The question now is no longer whether Yemen was part of the out-of-Africa migration. The question is, why did we stop listening to its story? In the quiet alleys of Sana'a, where ancient mosques shimmer under fading gold, and where children's laughter echoes through a maze of stone, the blood of two continents flows through every heartbeat. Yemeni identity is more than flags or language. It is a paradox hidden within the body, a riddle that separates the stories of mothers from the legacy of fathers, a tale written in the double helix, one strand from the dry, stoic highlands of the north, the other from the lush, aching coasts of East Africa. Science now allows us to peel back the veil of time. When researchers sequenced the DNA of Yemenis across distant governorates, they uncovered something few expected: a stark division of ancestry between the paternal and maternal lines. A country genetically split along its own veins. The Y chromosome, passed from father to son, tells of a lineage anchored in the north, the Levant, Arabia, and ancient Mesopotamia. Haplogroup J1 dominates, not as an outsider, but as an heirloom, passed down unbroken for more than 5 millennia. It is the DNA of traders, builders, prophets, Levantine bloodlines that once walked side by side with Bronze Age kings and left their imprint deep in Yemen's interior. Regions like Sheba, Marib, and Beta don't just echo with myth. They carry the unbroken genetic memory of those who forged the early heart of Semitic civilization. But then, there's the other line, the maternal one. Nearly a third of Yemeni mitochondrial DNA, passed only from mother to child, belongs to sub-Saharan African haplogroups, particularly L2A1. This is no ordinary statistic. It's a cry from history's margins, a reminder of mothers whose names were never written, women who did not arrive in Yemen as conquerors or merchants, but as captives. For over 1,000 years, Yemen sat at the edge of the Red Sea slave trade. While its incense and myrrh traveled north, ships carried women from East Africa to its southern shores. Many were enslaved. Many bore children. And while the empire that bought them crumbled, the genetic echoes of their daughters remained, whispering through mitochondrial strands that not even time could erase. The result is haunting. On one side, a nation descended from ancient patriarchal lines of Arabia and the Levant, powerful, old, proud. On the other, the silent, uninterrupted song of African women, passed from mother to daughter, across centuries of silence. What makes this even more profound is the imbalance. While the African maternal signal is strong, the autosomal, the overall, African DNA in Yemen is surprisingly low, especially inland. It's as if generations of East African ancestry were diluted by waves of Arabian and Levantine male dominance. And yet, despite this, the African mother line persists. Undimmed. It tells us something critical about how history unfolded, not in grand battles or trade deals, but in homes, in unions where power and vulnerability met, in genetic mergers forged not through choice, but through survival. Still, this isn't just a story of slavery or subjugation. It's a story of genetic resistance, a tribute to maternal continuity, so strong that even empire couldn't overwrite it. Coastal regions like Hudaida and Hadramaut bear the clearest marks. Here, the African influence is not just stronger, it is vivid. These were the landing points, the intersections, the places where the Indian Ocean's tide brought not just goods, but people, where African matrilineals settled and stayed, where isolation helped preserve their genetic distinctiveness. And yet, inland Yemen resisted. Mountain regions clung tightly to their Levantine paternal codes, passed from generation to generation like oral tradition. The deeper you go into Yemen's highlands, the older and purer the J1 lineage becomes, more diverse, more established, more stubborn. It is not a sign of recent migration. It's proof of ancient, rooted ancestry. This dual structure, north in the blood of the fathers, south in the song of the mothers, makes Yemen genetically unlike any other place on earth. A land suspended between two continents. Not blended, but layered. It defies modern identity labels. Are Yemenis Arabs? Africans? Descendants of Bronze Age Levantines? The answer is not either/or. It is all at once. A living embodiment of empire, trade, loss, and endurance. The genetic divide tells a story that Yemen's history books could never fully write. One of domination and intimacy, of migration and resilience, of forgotten women and remembered fathers. And in every heartbeat, in every newborn Yemeni child, that ancient tension continues. A dialogue not of politics or tribe, but of inheritance. This is not just DNA. It's history written in flesh. Beneath the cracked soil of ancient Yemen, far below the footprints of caravans and conquerors, lies a map unlike any drawn by kings. A map made of chromosomes, stitched by millennia, untouched by politics, but shaped by power. For most of the world, history is found in monuments, manuscripts, and myths. But in Yemen, history pulses quietly through the bloodstream. In the deepest cells of its people, a forgotten empire still breathes. Geneticists, working not with scrolls, but with strands of DNA, uncovered something extraordinary. Two massive waves of genetic influx, separated by thousands of years, each leaving an irreversible imprint on the Yemeni genome. The first came more than 5,000 years ago, not by sword, but by slow migration. It wasn't an army that reshaped Yemen's interior. It was movement from ancient Palestine and Syria, from the Bronze Age Levant. This influx did not erase what was there. It mingled, it lingered, and in regions like Sheba, that DNA remains, quietly preserved, like a buried library of forgotten cities. The genetic traces link modern Yemenis, not just to their Arabian neighbors, but to the lands of Ebla, Ugarit, and ancient Israel, civilizations that rose and fell while Yemen held onto their echo. Then came the second wave, smaller in scale, but still sharp in impact. Around 750 years ago, as maritime trade between East Africa and southern Arabia surged, the Red Sea became a corridor for more than just spices and ivory. Along its waters came people, some seeking life, many taken from it. East African communities, especially in the Horn, were drawn into Yemen's coastal orbit. Some arrived through exchange, others through bondage. Either way, they left their genetic fingerprints, particularly in port regions like Hudaida and Hadramaut. But these aren't just timestamps. They're fingerprints of empires that vanished, and ones we barely remember. Fine structure analysis, a powerful genetic clustering tool, shows that the majority of Yemenis today still form a distinct group, tightly linked to Saudi populations and ancient Levantines, while maintaining a subtle drift toward Egypt. In this way, Yemen does not mirror Africa. It reflects the ancient heart of West Asia, a crossroads of pre-Islamic trade, Bronze Age civilization, and pre-Arabic cultures that defy modern boundaries. The data is crystal clear. In the governorates of Sheba, DNA overlaps with Bronze Age genomes from Jordan, Israel, and Syria. These aren't modern parallels, they're ancient links, deeper than language or religion. It means that long before the Quran was recited in Yemen's mosques, long before incense fueled the Sabaean economy, a bloodline was already running from the heart of the Levant straight into the highlands of Arabia. Even more compelling is what this tells us about ancient alliances. The incense trade didn't just bring wealth, it brought people. Merchants, porters, scribes, and with them, their children. Admixture plots show these gene flows like ripples in a pool, not violent crashes, but waves gently reshaping the shore. In Hadramaut, that shore met the Indian Ocean, and here DNA from Indian subcontinent populations begins to appear, faint but real. Geneticists observed an India-specific component in certain Hadramauti samples, suggesting long-standing maritime contact with South Asia, centuries before the British ever touched Arabian soil. What emerges is a picture of Yemen not as an isolated desert, but as a cultural superhighway, a place where African, Arabian, Levantine, and Indian ancestries didn't just pass through, they stayed, settled, and blended. Even the admixture visualizations reflect this complexity. When viewed at a regional scale, Yemen becomes a palette of intertwined ancestries. The inland north leans heavily toward ancient West Asia. The southern coast bears stronger African hues. And the east? A subtle but traceable imprint from the Indian Ocean world. And yet, despite this mosaic, Yemen maintains its own genetic identity. Unified, yet stratified. A land of contrast, but not confusion. It's this balance between diversity and continuity that makes the Yemeni genome such a powerful tool for tracing forgotten migrations. Because DNA never forgets. Empires can crumble, borders can vanish, but within the strands of a child born in Marib or Taiz today lives a memory older than any book. A silent archive of when nations were just stories, and blood was the only map. Long before pyramids rose from the Nile, before stone temples crowned Mesopotamian rivers, and even before cities had names, there were the Natufians. They left no grand monuments, no royal tombs. Only seeds buried with the dead and fragments of bone whispering of a revolution, the dawn of settled life. And yet, their story does not end in the Levant, where they once thrived. It lives on, not where you might expect, but in the highlands of Yemen. Recent genetic studies have uncovered a staggering truth. Yemenis, particularly those from inland mountain districts like Sheba, carry within them the deepest echoes of Natufian ancestry. This isn't coincidence. It's inheritance, uninterrupted across more than 12,000 years. In the ancient DNA archives, modern Levantines, those who live today in Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, have shifted away from their Natufian roots. Their genomes were shaped by waves of later ancestry from Anatolia, the Caucasus, and Zagros Mountains. A reshuffling of identity. But Yemen? Yemen stood still. It sheltered something the rest of the region forgot. This is why, when scientists project genome clusters across ancient populations, it's not the modern Levantines who sit closest to Natufians. It's Yemenis, especially those isolated by mountain and time. These aren't just numbers. They're genetic ruins, as powerful as any broken temple, yet more intimate. They reveal a continuity from the world's first semi-sedentary foragers, straight into the bloodstream of today's Yemeni farmers, traders, and poets. The ones who still till the soil their ancestors might have once sowed. But the story doesn't end with ancient humans. Deeper inside the Yemeni genome lies another secret. Older, colder, and less human. Neanderthal DNA. In the merged whole genome sequencing data, Yemenis show clear patterns of Neanderthal introgression, clustering most closely with Arabian and Southwest Asian populations. This introgression didn't come from Africa. It came from Eurasia, a genetic legacy left from the first Homo sapiens to encounter and interbreed with Neanderthals, somewhere between the Levant and Iran. This means the Yemeni genome holds more than the memory of early human culture. It carries the imprint of another species, a vanished cousin, a shadow lineage. The Neanderthal segments in Yemenis, although small, are consistent and statistically significant. Not accidental drift, but real inheritance. It's as if, long after the Neanderthals disappeared from Europe, echoes of them remained hidden in these arid hills, clinging to survival through the genes of their hybrid descendants. Together, these two ancient legacies, Natufian and Neanderthal, form a double helix of forgotten worlds. And yet, the modern world rarely looks here. While media obsesses over European roots or Silk Road intersections, the genetic crossroads of Yemen has gone ignored, buried under dust and conflict. But now, with whole genome analysis, PCA visualizations, and admixture plotting, the data speaks louder than ever. There's even poetic symmetry in how these ancient markers survive. The Natufians, who gathered grain and stayed in one place, left their deepest signal in a people tied to terraced mountains and ancestral villages. And the Neanderthals, a wandering species now extinct, left theirs in the genes of a population caught between continents, never fully African, never entirely Asian, forever in between. It reframes how we understand Yemen. This is not just a country with old traditions. It is a genetic museum, a living fossil, a place where ancient humanity, in all its messiness, blending, and mystery, has survived intact. And the most haunting part? Most Yemenis don't even know. They carry the torch of the first humans to settle, and the last of those who vanished, without ever being told their walking history. But now the genome has spoken, and it says this: if you want to find the purest link to the oldest cultures that shaped our world, you do not look to cities or capitals. You look to Yemen. Beneath every heartbeat in Yemen lies a palimpsest, a story rewritten, not erased. Time here does not flow in a straight line. It coils. It folds. Civilizations rise, disappear, and echo again, not in ruins or stone carvings, but in the code of those still living. Yemen is not built on top of history. It is history. From the moment the first humans crossed its dry plateaus after the last glacial maximum, Yemen became a vault of bloodlines, accumulating layer after layer of human migration, yet never fully dissolving the past. The most recent DNA studies do not show a population overwhelmed by foreign waves. Instead, they reveal something far rarer, a genetic architecture of preservation. At the core of this structure is the Y chromosome haplogroup J1, not just dominant, but deeply diverse. This isn't the footprint of a recent settler. It's the residue of a population so old. It's no longer marked by a single origin point, but by an entire region's prehistoric breadth. The subclades of J1 in Yemen are not clones. Their ancient branches diverged long ago, now growing side by side like wild trees in forgotten groves. That diversity tells a story not of replacement, but of endurance. It suggests that the ancestors who arrived during the Bronze Age or before didn't just visit. They stayed. They became the root system of the people we see today. And while the male lines carry the stamp of the Levant and Arabia, the female lines, traced through mitochondrial DNA, tell of East African threads, strong and persistent. Haplogroups like L2A1, common in sub-Saharan Africa, remain vividly present. They haven't faded. They haven't been buried beneath centuries of autosomal recombination. Instead, they live on, mostly unchanged, passed from mother to child, generation after generation. In the governorate of Udida, for instance, 3 out of 5 sequence samples held the L2A1 haplogroup. It's not a fluke. It's a genetic fingerprint of East African women whose descendants still live, laugh, and labor along Yemen's western coast, unaware that their maternal ancestry stretches across the sea. But these aren't isolated threads. They're interwoven, precisely, complexly. The coastal regions bear heavier African ancestry. Inland, the genetic picture skews toward West Asian heritage. Yet neither side erases the other. Instead, they create gradients, seamless transitions that reflect ancient movement patterns more accurately than any modern map. And it is in these gradients that the most astonishing insight emerges. Yemen's genetic structure mirrors its geography and its history. The mountains sheltered ancient lineages. The coast welcomed newer ones. The interior served as a corridor, a mixture of people and stories. DNA doesn't lie. It merely translates the Earth's memory into language. Even the timelines align. Linkage disequilibrium decay analysis shows an admixture event from Palestine around 5,200 years ago, a time when urban centers first bloomed in the Levant and trading links stretched across the Fertile Crescent. Then, another event around 750 years ago, likely tied to the increased African influence along maritime routes. 2 pulses of history, 2 layers of blood, both still visible today. What's remarkable isn't just what changed Yemen, but what didn't? Unlike other regions shaped by constant warfare, colonization, or mass resettlement, Yemen's population structure has remained surprisingly stable. Even the most recent gene flows didn't overwrite the past. They settled beside it, forming distinct, yet coexisting strands in the population's genetic fabric. This means when a child is born in the valleys of Ib, or among the coastal salt flats of Lahij, their DNA isn't just modern, it's layered. It carries Levantine echoes older than monotheism, African songs that crossed the Red Sea in wooden boats, Arabian rhythms that passed from tribe to tribe before borders had names. Each layer tells of a different chapter, not in opposition, but in harmony. This is why Yemen is so genetically unique. It has not forgotten. It has not erased. It has held on. And as global interest in ancient DNA grows, Yemen stands as one of the few places on Earth where the past was never buried deep, only carried forward. Across the fractured landscape of Yemen, where the scars of war stretch from mountaintop to market square, the conflict feels entirely modern. But what if the divisions that define today were rooted far deeper than ideology or politics, not in maps, but in mitochondria? Genetics reveals what headlines cannot, that Yemen's current struggle may echo ancient fault lines, etched into the body long before the first gun was fired. When scientists examined the genetic structure across Yemen's districts, they didn't just find diversity, they found patterns. Precise, predictable, geographic. The governorates of Sheba and Marib, nestled inland among rocky highlands, form one distinct genetic cluster. Meanwhile, regions like Aden and Udida, open to sea and trade, form another. And the contrast between them isn't just statistical, it's ancestral. Coastal Yemen, especially in the south and west, carries the unmistakable imprint of East Africa. It's found in the maternal haplogroups, in the admixture decay curves, and in the subtle push of PCA plots. This African presence isn't new, but it's more pronounced here than anywhere else in the country. A legacy of centuries of trade, migration, and human trafficking across the Red Sea. It changed the coast, and it changed it forever. Meanwhile, the northern and central highlands bear a different story, a genomic signature aligned more closely with the ancient Levant, with deeper West Asian threads. These regions were less accessible, more insulated, less touched by the tides of Indian Ocean exchange. And it shows. The result? A country that is genetically continuous, yet regionally stratified, not by accident, but by centuries of different experiences. Now, fast forward to the present. The very regions that carry the highest levels of African genetic influence, Aden, Udida, parts of Hadramaut, have also borne the brunt of recent instability, displacement, and economic collapse. At the same time, strongholds like Marib and the Sheba district, grounded in older Levantine lineages, have become central players in Yemen's internal power struggle. This doesn't imply destiny. Genes do not dictate belief, allegiance, or fate, but they do hold memory. And in Yemen, the memory is sharp. It remembers the Red Sea slave trade, where women crossed as captives and stayed as mothers. It remembers the incense routes, where Levantine merchants brought not just goods, but bloodlines. It remembers maritime exchanges with India, Persia, and East Africa, all layering new ancestry onto a population that never fully let go of the old. The result is a paradox. A nation torn by civil war, yet united by shared, ancient ancestry. A country where genetic boundaries do not match its political ones, but where the echoes of historical migration still align uncannily with lines of modern division. Even more telling is the way Yemenis perceive their own origins. While many trace descent through male tribal lines, believing themselves to be the custodians of original Arab identity, their DNA complicates that narrative. It says, you are more. You are older. You are part of something wider, more tangled, more human. That truth, uncovered not in myth but in molecular biology, is perhaps the most revolutionary of all. It tells us that the future of Yemen cannot be understood without its past. Not the recent past, the buried past, the genetic past, because long before there were nations, there were lineages, and long before there were armies, there were migrations. Every Yemeni, whether in a refugee tent in Djibouti or a highland village untouched by electricity, carries a history that outlasts empire, a history shaped by women who arrived from across the sea, and by men whose ancestors once roamed the Fertile Crescent in search of new lands. In the face of devastation, this knowledge is power. It reminds us that identity does not begin with a flag or end with a border. It begins in the marrow, in the silence between generations. And in Yemen, that silence speaks louder than any gun. Before language carved its way into clay tablets, before prophets walked the valleys, before empires breathed names into deserts, Yemen was already telling its story in silence. Not through stone, not through scroll, but through the veins. Every genetic thread in modern Yemen is older than its cities, older than its wars, older even than the idea of Yemen itself. What makes this land so haunting isn't just how long it's been inhabited, but how little of that history has been erased. In a world where conquest usually rewrites bloodlines, Yemen resisted the pattern. Instead of being rewritten, it layered. And those layers are still there, intact, complex, alive. Take the results of the most advanced genetic studies on the region. Whole genome sequencing, performed on individuals from every major governorate, revealed something startling. Not just diversity, but intact continuity. A continuity that links modern Yemenis to some of the oldest human migrations ever recorded, and to lineages that predate the Bronze Age by thousands of years. This is not folklore. This is hard data. Yemen isn't simply part of civilization's history. It's buried deep in its origin. The male lineage, the Y chromosome signatures like J1A, isn't just present. It's dominant. But dominance is not the full story. It's the diversity within that haplogroup, the number of microvariants, the phylogenetic spread. That tells us this isn't an import. It's an origin point, a reservoir. Meanwhile, the maternal side holds a different truth, one carried through mitochondrial DNA. A third of Yemenis today still bear African maternal haplogroups. Not traces, not hints. Full, uninterrupted lines of inheritance. Their presence isn't temporary. It's deeply rooted. Together, these lineages sketch a map that connects East Africa, the Levant, Arabia, and beyond, with Yemen at the center, not the periphery. This is what makes Yemen's genome unlike any other. It's a bridge that never collapsed. While other populations were shaped by large-scale replacement, from Anatolian farmers in Europe to steppe migrations across Central Asia, Yemen absorbed, but rarely forgot. Its coastlines welcomed, its mountains preserved. It has memory embedded in its genes, and that memory defies assumptions. The closest genetic relative to the world's first settled foragers, the Natufians, is not found in modern Palestine or Jordan. It's found in highland Yemen. Meanwhile, the echoes of Neanderthal DNA, those rare, ancient fragments that link us to a forgotten species, cluster firmly alongside Yemen's Arabian neighbors. Even in the face of modern displacement, civil war, famine, diaspora, Yemen's genetic map holds. It doesn't flatten. It fractures along predictable, ancient lines. Districts like Sheba and Hadramaut retain distinct ancestral signatures. Aden, a port city tied to East Africa and India, forms a separate cluster. The past remains visible, not just in the face of an elder, but in the genome of a child. In this way, Yemen defies time. It offers not a snapshot, but a long exposure, a photo of civilization's heartbeat, taken over millennia. And so, the question changes. This is not about where Yemen came from. This is about how much of human history still lives there. Because Yemen doesn't just carry ancient DNA. It carries unbroken memory. The kind not found in textbooks. The kind etched in flesh. And perhaps, in the end, this is Yemen's truest legacy. Not its kingdoms. Not its conquests. But the silent, stubborn survival of the bloodline of civilization.